Penn State men's hockey and Guy Gadowski are linked to not one, not two, not three, but four of the premier prospects that are available to sign in college hockey. This is the momentum they were looking for. Watch out, because Penn State is about to become one of the premier programs in all of the sport.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State men's hockey. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Seyko, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and wrestling. He is Eric Ohlson, color commentator on the radio broadcast covering this Penn State men's hockey team. So look no further than an expert when it comes to the Nittany Lions here, led by Guy Gadowski. As well, a longtime assistant is actually departing from the program. We're going to talk about the impact of that, but primarily focusing on how Penn State is in the running, is strongly in the mix, has been rumored to be favored for names like, college hockey fans will recognize guys like Gavin McKenna, Porter Martone, Michael Misa, just to name a few. And Penn State's like I said, favored by hockey insiders that they're going to land maybe at least one or two, it seems like, maybe all four. So Eric, we'll be careful with how we make these predictions, but it's really about talking about where Penn State has been able to position itself to be strongly in the mix, because it's multiple reporters, insiders saying that, hey, Penn State's the favorite. They should be projected to land this prospect. We're also going to talk about the timeline here, Eric, from what you're able to share with us. So those four names, I mean, that would make Penn State, you want to talk about momentum, that would make Penn State, if they are able to land one or two of these players, would make them the odds-on favorite to not only make the Frozen Four, but win the whole thing next year, in my mind.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable for the team to be in the conversation with these names. Penn State's never had that blue chip prospect. We do know they were well in the mix for Logan Cooley a few years ago, and he would have been the first guy really that you can call a blue chip prospect. It was down to Penn State and Minnesota. We all know how that played out. He chose to go to Minnesota, and it was the third overall selection by, at the time, the Arizona Coyotes. So Penn State missed out on that. And now, in this new world we live in of CHL players being available to play college hockey, in this new world of NIL, they are now in the mix for these big names. A couple of those guys are projected to be top 10 selections in the NHL draft coming up in 2 weeks. Gavin McKenna, by any hockey mind that knows anything about draft prospects, is said to be, the odds-on favorite to be the number overall selection next year in 2026. So we're talking about pretty premier talent that the Nittany Lions are being linked to.
We're not using that word lightly when we say that. No.
I mean, you can also add Jackson Smith, the defenseman, to that list. There were tweets sent out last week that Jackson Smith had committed. Then it was backtracked. He is not committed. But I think that's a good sign. Even though it is a rumor, it's a good sign that he's okay. You could assume from that information that he is strongly considering, and that and maybe there was a silent commitment, but that's why, Eric, I'm eager to talk to you, because there is a unique process about all of this. I mean, this is completely brand new territory, not only for Penn State trying to bring in these premier prospects, but what it means to recruit and have on collegiate teams CHL prospects. Yeah, it's a tough world right now, because typically hockey insiders, majority of the time, they get things right. If there's rumblings out there, where there's smoke, there's usually fire, right? And the tweet that was sent out came from an athletic reporter based out of Toronto, I believe. And don't know what information he got. Was he told something? Was he told bad information? Was he just going off of rumblings? Don't know.
Yeah.
But what we do know is that Jackson Smith is visiting Penn State. We do know that visit was going to occur after the NHL Draft Combine, which was last week up in Buffalo. That's all the detail I know about that. I would imagine with the draft being in 2 weeks, some of these dominoes are going to start to fall, either before the draft or right after the draft, because these players are in a unique situation of, do I stay in the CHL for one more year? Do I go to college hockey and play there? Some guys have already made that decision and have committed to programs around the country. Some guys, and these big fish that haven't made decisions yet, I think they're waiting because they're trying to see, okay, what happens in the draft? Where do I end up? Is there a path to the NHL maybe as early as next season? That's the decision they're going to have to weigh. Do you get drafted to a team that says, hey, it's not going to be the right time for you yet, go play one more year, and then it's okay, do I go back to the team I was at in the CHL, or do I go play college hockey? So that's why you're seeing this timeline really be extended into June, maybe even early July. So that's why Gavin McKenna has not committed. Porter Martone is not committed. Michael Misa is not committed. These guys are top-end talent. Yes. And I think they're trying to gauge the waters of, okay, what's going to be the best situation for me and next year? Is that sign an entry-level contract in the NHL with a team that drafts you in 2 weeks? Is it go back to the CHL again for another year? Or is it go play college hockey for a year?
It's interesting and it's intriguing. And it is, like I said, it's brand new in the entire landscape of college hockey. And Penn State being a realistic destination, it's about the timing of all of it. Okay, so I don't think, if it wasn't for this Frozen Four run, without this Frozen Four run a year ago, okay, maybe you would be linked to potentially a Michael Misa, for example, but that's also another domino, because when you think about it, okay, so Penn State gets a commitment from his brother, Luke Misa, and then that makes a ton of sense. The brothers have not actually played on the same team before, right? But I think about the timing of it all, that you are now able to have CHL prospects, Canadian Hockey League prospects in NCAA college hockey, and Penn State going on this, I don't want to call it miraculous. I mean, this was a team that was poised. We talked about it. We called it well out in front, like, hey, this is a dark horse sleeper team if you're not paying close attention. And look at that. They made the Frozen Four. So you combine Penn State's momentum with the fact that, okay, the floodgates are open. Here are all these prospects that have not been able to play in this league. So it's all kind of coming together, and people are saying, oh, Penn State's not just that team anymore that has lofty aspirations. Because you've said it before, Eric, that most other prospects, notable prospects anyway, always looked at Penn State as that B team. I want to see it happen. I want to see that breakthrough. Well, they had the breakthrough, so that's why we're here.
Yeah, it's been tough. There's so many good college hockey teams, and until the CHL avenue was opened, all these teams are competing for the best USHL players, the best players from the U.S. National Team Development Program, the best international players. You don't see a whole lot of those international guys coming over and playing college hockey, but you certainly do get some. And Penn State has had guys like Pavlichev, Smirnov, Arna Talvidia, Oscar Audio, Eric Audio. So that does happen. But typically, it's the best UHL guys and the best national team guys. That's where the battle has been. And that's where, as a new program, you are fighting that uphill. It's like trying to climb Mount Everest. You are competing against programs that have 50, 80, 90, 100 plus years of history on their side, have national championships, have that pedigree. And you're trying to say, hey, we might be the new kids on the block, but come here and things are going to happen. Magic's going to happen. That's what it's been like for the previous, 13 years, basically, for Penn State. And now, again, you have this new prospect pool. So you're still looking at USHL guys and national team guys, but now you have these other best players that are available. And the momentum Penn State has coming off the Frozen Four is certainly important because you can make the argument that, hey, only one big team made the Frozen Four this year, and it was Penn State. They lost 3-1 to Boston on an empty net goal. Ohio State lost 8-3 to Boston in that regional semifinal. Minnesota was out in the first game. Michigan State upset by Cornell, out in the first game too. Penn State was the only Big Ten team to win a game in the tournament this season. It doesn't happen on a fluke.
Still to come on this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. Well, Penn State men's hockey, all of this momentum stems from NIL, right? It's because Penn State can pay these players. No, that is an element, but that's not the full story. We'll tell you why coming up next here on the show. And the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all of my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Now, Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money. You start building wealth. You'll get surprising insights. When I started using Monarch for myself, I realized just how much I was spending money on different things, groceries, package deliveries. Now I get to budget smarter and save more. You get the all-in-one convenience instead of juggling multiple apps. You can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan long-term goals. And that's where you'll get easy collaboration. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is right. 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year.
2 years ago, they went to overtime in the Allentown final against a Michigan team that had 5 first-round draft picks on that roster. Guys that are playing in the NHL right now. So again, it's not like Penn State just came out of nowhere and is throwing NIL money, and that's the only reason they're in this conversation. Is NIL a factor? Absolutely. Again, that's the world we live in now. Yes. I have no information on that. I don't know what numbers have been thrown around, but you have to imagine, and it's the same thing with all these other programs. Your Michigan State, Boston, BC, like they're all throwing NIL money around as well to get some of these big guys. So that's just the nature of it at this point. But what you can't say is it's only about NIL. Your college, your hockey future is so important that these players are not just going to burn a year for the sake of making some money. Because if you do the math, there was a number thrown out of $250,000 for Porter Martone. That came out a month plus ago, something along those lines. Let's take that as an example. If that number is anywhere in the realm of possibility, say you give that to Martone for a year. He gets drafted top 5. That's kind of where his projection is, maybe 5, even falling back to 7, 8, or 9. Either way, top 10 draft pick this year. If he signs an entry-level contract, typically as a blue chip prospect, your entry level is going to be in the $800,000 or $900,000 range. That's the top end of your entry level. I don't know if it's quite broken $1 million yet. It might not in the current collective bargaining agreement. Okay. Typically, your 3-year entry level contract for the best guys are in around like 900 something thousand. Why would you just take $250 for a year where you're not even making a third of what you probably would if you sign your entry level contract? That's what you got to think about. Like these guys, it's not just about the money for them. It's about what is the best for my development, because these are names that are probably going to be NHL mainstays. And your development is so important in this time of your life. So it's not like a college basketball player taking money for a year and then going to the league. Yeah. Like it's just different. It's a different world. It's a different sport. So I don't want people to believe that it's purely about the money in hockey. Is it a factor? Sure. But that's not the number one choice. I think if Penn State gets one of these players or multiple, it is going to be because these players believe that they can come to Penn State and it's going to be good for their development. All that other stuff might be perks on top of it, but your development in hockey is so important that one bad year, like Gavin McKenna is not going to be drafted this year. Next year is his year. He comes to Penn State. Let's say he has a really bad season in college hockey. All of a sudden, do teams be like, ooh, is he a number 1 overall pick? Or is he now 2, 3, or 4?
And you're going to lose money if that happens.
So it's again, it's so important. So if Penn State does get some of these players, it will be because the momentum the program has, the belief in where they're going, and the fact that these players believe it's a good spot for them to come for one or maybe multiple seasons. So I think that's kind of the buzz that's happening right now. And again, you can look back at Penn State's history. They just finished their 13th season as a Division I program. They have made the tournament 4 times, 5 if you count the one they qualified for that was canceled due to COVID. That was the year they won the Big Ten regular season title, and never got to play in the Big Ten tournament because it was canceled going into the semifinal round. So we can throw the number 5 out of NCAA tournaments. That's 5 tournaments in 13 seasons as a new program competing in a stacked Big Ten conference. You look at the next team that came after Penn State, Arizona State. They just finished their 10th season in Division I. They just had their first season as a conference, so they joined the NCHC. So they had 9 seasons as independent, 1 season in conference. They've qualified for 2 NCAA tournaments, one of which was the COVID one that was canceled. And then they were in the 18-19 tournament and lost to Quinnipiac in the first round. So that is the next newest program compared to Penn State, a 3-year difference. Penn State has been to officially 3 more tournaments, and you throw the COVID ones in there too if you want. Has a Big Ten tournament title, a regular season title, and has now been to a Frozen Four. Again, competing against Minnesota, Michigan State, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Notre Dame. It's not a fluke.
No, it is not. And that was going to be, I mean, you jumped right into it. I was going to say, hey, Penn State, the immediate reaction is that, well, it's NIL. And Penn State has the money to spend, and they're focused on it. Here's what is all true at the same time. NIL is a component, but that's it. It is a component. Penn State has momentum, as we've addressed. They are coming off of a Frozen Four run, and they've shown consistency. They've shown, as you pointed out, 5 appearances to this point in the NCAA tournament, if we're, counting them all in their respective nature. So Penn State has momentum. Guy Gadowski's a hell of a coach. Guy Gadowski's a heck of a coach. So it speaks for itself there. There is one, Eric, I want your opinion on this. I don't think this was a widespread accepted take, but I did see some, again, you have people on the internet that say, well, Penn State hockey's cool and all, but they actually don't develop talent. That's not a place where you can go to Penn State and become a better hockey prospect. Okay, so why are all these people linked to Penn State? Why are the top prospects? Why are 4 of the top, conservatively speaking, top 15 prospects over the next 2 NHL draft cycles? NHL draft cycles where they are strongly considering Penn State. If this was a place where you couldn't develop, I get it that Penn State's system and what Guy Gadowski wants to run on offense is, more about winning. It's about peppering the goal. But the system doesn't make the player. I still feel like these individuals can develop and get better as players. They're not going to carry baggage with them to the pros just because they spent a couple of systems with Guy Gadowski. He's not going to. So just because they run a system and it works for what the Nittany Lions want to do doesn't mean that's going to jeopardize their outlook as an NHL prospect.
No, because you recruit players that you believe can fit the way your program plays, that fit your culture. Now you might have a Gavin McKenna where doesn't matter what team you put him on, he's going to be the best player on the ice.
He's the missing puzzle piece for anybody and everybody.
He's been talked about as a generational talent. Those words don't get thrown around very often. So look, can people make that argument that Penn State doesn't have that history? Yes, but you have to look at the roots of it as to why. Kind of boils down to look, you don't quite get Cinderella stories in hockey. You don't exactly get a player who is kind of middle of the pack, USHL, NHL not really looking like a future path, goes to play college hockey, all of a sudden lights the world on fire. If he's still young enough to get drafted, all of a sudden becomes a second or third round draft pick, goes to the league and plays 20 years. It doesn't really happen. That's not to say it doesn't, but that's kind of, a diamond in the rough situation. You don't get those Cinderella stories in hockey. You get a Gavin McKenna that's projected to be a number 1 overall pick who goes on to play 20 years in the league, a Connor Bedard, Macklin Celebrini, Connor McDavid. Like those names, that's what happens. Now, you will get guys who go and play college hockey, and if they're still young enough to get drafted, they could end up being, a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick.
Yeah.
And there are guys in the league that are playing for the Stanley Cup right now that are late round draft picks. You can go on and have a great career in the league just because you're drafted in the 6th or 7th round, just like in any other sport. It doesn't mean you're going to be a bust. Sometimes first round draft picks don't pan out.
Yeah.
Sometimes second round draft picks don't either. And your 5th round draft pick turns into a cornerstone of your franchise. So that's kind of the root of it. Penn State, again, has not had those blue chip prospects.
Still to come on this episode, how many of these prospects could Penn State realistically land? They are in the mix for all of them. What is the realistic outcome? Plus, Penn State does see Keith Fisher move on for a head coaching opportunity. Well-deserved, but what does it mean for the program moving forward? That's all coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions.
They have had guys, though, that came and believed in Penn State hockey and had great college careers and have gone on to play pro hockey and done very well. You have Alex Limoges in Hershey in the AHL, who is a dominant player for the Bears. That's Washington's system. So he hasn't really gotten the opportunity yet in the Caps to move up and get that NHL opportunity because Washington has had too much of a log jam at the center position. And that's what Limo's playing right now. But he's been phenomenal for Hershey. Has a Calder Cup championship to his name. He might have 2, I believe, if they went on the team when they went back to back. So you have him, Brandon Byro in the AHL as well. Nate Soucies playing for the Hartford Wolfpack. That's the Rangers affiliate. There are guys, and Penn State has had draft picks too. You had Evan Barrett, who was drafted by the Chicago Blackhawks. He signed with Rockford after he left Penn State, and he's kind of had some up and down time. He might be in the ECHL right now, but Penn State has sent players to pro hockey.
Yes.
Look, Byro has an NHL goal with Buffalo. He might have a second one too. Casey Bailey played a game for Toronto years ago. They have sent guys to pro hockey. So, again, if these players come, it's because they believe in the system that's good for their development, and they want to be a Nittany Lion for at least a year and see what happens. So, again, Penn State just doesn't have 100 years of history to lean on. It's not Michigan where you can open up the list and say, hey, we've sent 100 guys to the NHL. 20 of them have won Stanley Cups. You just don't have that history. They've only played 13 years of Division I hockey.
Now, just briefly before we get to the departure of a longtime assistant coach here, taking a head coaching job at Lindenwood. So congrats to Coach Fisher. Just briefly, Eric, is it realistic to think that they can get all 4 of these rumored prospects again, Smith was said to have committed, whether that was silently and things need to be done. It needs to get across the finish line there. And then again, the domino effect of Michael Misa, who is the brother of Luke Misa, who is actually committed to Penn State. So that one would make sense. And then Porter Martone, who was, apparently rumored to have an NIL deal on the table with Penn State. Gavin McKenna seems like he's down to Penn State, Michigan State. That's actually a tangible report. Michigan seems to be out of the running. I do think it's fair to assume that they could get 3 of them between just what's been reported there. And look, I know things can change at any point in time. We still haven't seen the NHL draft, which is going to go down in about 2 weeks, give or take. But 4 out of 4, that would be, Penn State is just on an absolute roll. You can't even begin to describe it. But if I think it's fair to say that they land 2, maybe even 3 out of these 4.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Again, I don't know how much.
At least one, at the very minimum, one in Michael Misa.
Yeah, I don't know how much fire there is to the smoke that's out there with some of these guys. If you're gonna say definitely getting one, I'd probably put the odds on Jackson Smith again, just because of how much his name was linked to Penn State, and we do know he was going to visit. He's projected to be somewhere around the 10th overall selection coming up in the draft this year. 3rd overall defenseman, probably taken off the board. So he could be a guy that maybe you can put the odds on of coming. And after that, I really don't know. It's hard to estimate what happens with those other names. The fact that Gavin McKenna is really looking at Penn State and Michigan State, I think says a lot about what he thinks of college hockey and the development that he can get playing in college hockey versus just staying with Medicine Hat one more year, where he just put up an unreal season up there. So I really don't know. And, should they get multiple of these names, then you're kind of looking at the cascading effect of, okay, what happens with some of these other recruits that have already committed to Penn State? Are there decommitments? Do guys push it off a year and say, I'll just play another year of wherever I'm at and come to Penn State next year? That's in play too. So, it's exciting to talk about. It's exciting to think about, but hard to know how many of these dominoes are actually going to end up wearing a Penn State sweater next year.
Now let's pivot to, rather than an addition, a subtraction. As 13-year assistant coach, somebody that's been with Guy Godowski more than a decade. He has been one of the staples to this Penn State hockey program through it all. And that is Keith Fisher, who deservedly accepted the head coaching job with Lindenwood. Eric, how big of a deal is this? Obviously, it is a big deal. I don't need to, it's not rocket science to understand that, but kind of describe the impact of this loss and how Penn State can even think to begin to offset it.
Yeah. Couldn't be happier for Fish. He'd gotten a bump up to associate head coach a few years ago. So he had that title. He just had been with Guy for so long, and going back to their Princeton days together before coming to Penn State. It's you see some coaching duos that kind of stay together like that for a long time, and that's what Guy and Keith had. So just a great guy, a great family. You got some young daughters who have kind of grown up around the program, which is always fun to see. And couldn't be happier for him to have this head coaching opportunity now with a young program in Lindenwood. If anyone knows what it takes to build a program to success, it's Fish, because that's what he and Guy did. Matt Lindsay on the staff as well before departing, and then Giuliano Pagliaro coming in and replacing him. Now you add Andrew Sturtz to the mix with that extra coach number that teams are able to have now. Fish knows what it takes to build a program up from the bottom, and I think he's going to do really well there. He's a really great recruiter. He's coached the defenseman for Penn State. They've had some really great defensemen come and play here, so I think he's going to do great at Lindenwood, and everyone's going to miss him around the team for sure. And it's always tough to see someone depart who has been such a fabric of a program. And that's what Fish was. Getting to talk with him on the ice, doing an interview after the win against UConn, and just seeing the emotion in his face, like, because he and Guy at that point were the only two that have been there from the beginning. of Penn State hockey.
Yeah.
And, to see both of them get rewarded for going to the Frozen Four after all that time and what it took to build the program up. You could just see what it meant to him to have that, kind of relief that, it just happened. Like, finally, this is what we're building towards. So tough to see him depart. Now you have a hole to fill, and, you can say a pretty attractive hole to fill on a coaching staff that's being linked to the CHL names that already has a great roster coming back next year. A team that went to the Frozen Four, didn't have many subtractions from their team, have great talent coming in already. Penn State's a pretty attractive coaching position right now. So, a coach will be hired at some point that can, coach defensemen and what other skills they have. So you have, Sturts on the staff who is so involved in the power play and, coaching skills. You have Pagliaro, who, as a goaltender himself, handles that. Special teams, penalty kill, some stuff with the defensemen too. And you have Guy, who, of course, as the head coach, managing everything, spends a lot of time with the forwards. Penn State is going to have a coaching staff that is, ready to go from the start in October against Arizona State, and really excited to see who comes in, whether it's a college hockey coach, someone else from a different hockey world. But yeah, congrats to Fish. Again, he's going to do great at Lindenwood. It's great to see him get that opportunity now to be a head coach, because it's certainly well deserved.
And that is going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. In-depth look at Penn State men's hockey over the course of this offseason. He is Eric Ohlson, color commentator for the Penn State men's hockey radio broadcast team. My name is Zach Seyko, your host of the show as always. Thank you so much to each and every one of you for joining us on this episode. We'll have more conversations around hockey as information, as news unfolds with all of this, because Penn State right now is getting into the prime of what they can be as a juggernaut in college hockey. Eric, thank you so much for the time, and can't wait to pick up this conversation again in the not too distant future.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Exciting to see what happens here in the next couple of weeks with the draft coming up.